Hi, I'm Ali Words, and this is Last Unrifled Yaw. Last Unrifled Yaw is a podcast where we have conversations about video art, experimental music, avant-garde literature, performance art, and the occult. If you or someone you know would like to be on Last Unrifled Yaw, please get in touch. This time, we talk with Spider Theory, who makes a ritualistic video collage that taps into the collective unconscious. Hello, everyone. I'm Ali Words, and this is Spider Theory. Spider, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast and talk with you about my art and all of this. So, a little bit about me. I am a video collage artist. I also describe myself as a technomancer. And for me, that means just combining magic with technology and my art to kind of create something new and interactive. I kind of view some of the pieces that I make as kind of rituals that when the audience member views them, they're participating in the ritual.
Cool. Yeah, I also do a lot of stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to hearing your take on how you approach all of this.
Oh, great.
Could you describe how you approach making these video rituals? Or do you call them video rituals? That's what I call them.
I don't really have any names for describing them. I just kind of started making them. If you don't mind, I might actually adopt that term to describe the pieces that I make. I call them video collages. The fact that they are rituals is kind of private to me. I don't really mention that when posting them. Um, but yeah, when describing them to other people, I describe them as video collages. And then as far as the process goes in creating them, I am someone who really believes in just kind of trusting your instincts and trusting like reoccurring thoughts that might come up. And I'm a really big fan of like Carl Jung and the collective unconscious. And so I feel like my work as I'm creating it, part of the process is working with the collective unconscious, but also at the end of the video, my pieces, they're working on the collective unconscious of the audience. And I think your question was the process of creating. Was that
Yeah,
correct?
so
Okay.
I'd like this show to be at least somewhat educational because there's
Yeah.
very little material on people that are making video art as opposed to experimental film.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And so part of my process is finding pieces that call out to me. I really don't have a vision in mind when I start out. That isn't really how I work as an artist. I kind of let my feelings guide the piece, and the piece kind of evolves while I'm making it. And so initially, I will just start to search out a visual of some kind, go on a video website and see what kind of sparks my imagination. And then I'll allow myself to kind of free associate and relax. And then if like words or phrases come to mind, I'll take those into the search engine, see what comes up, kind of browse that, let words and phrases keep coming up until I finally narrow down a main subject video that I want to use for my piece. And then I license that, I take it into Premiere. And then I like to kind of play with keying out backgrounds and things. So I'll take the video into Premiere, I'll go into video effects, go into the color key area, and then I'll just start removing parts of the backgrounds that I don't know, that I just kind of feel don't need to be there. And then I'll start layering other videos and textures and things on top of one another. And through that process, a theme kind of emerges. And then that kind of directs me a little bit in what I need to be focusing on. And we kind of just work together during the process to create whatever this might be. And a lot of times I find that the piece doesn't really end until I choose a piece of music to go with it or even finalize it with a title. Sometimes the themes just don't really jump out to me until I'm in that very final stage of posting it on social media. And then all of a sudden, it's like an aha moment. And I'm like, oh, this is what the piece was always about. And I didn't even realize it.
It's interesting. It's very unconscious.
Hmm.
Now, I do want to throw in there a general disclaimer because sometimes I forget. If I ask you something about a ritual or any entities you've spoken with or anything that you consider to be that you either don't want to speak about for whatever reason, it's
Hmm.
okay not to answer.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if you're comfortable talking about it, what are some of the themes that you can talk about?
As far as the technomancy goes, or even with just themes of the videos, is that
I
what
was
you're asking?
imagining like the videos for now, and
Yeah,
then like bridging
sure.
into technomancy later.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, I find that a lot of the themes of my videos actually come from my background in performing art. So a lot of them involve like movement and dance, which then in turn I find are speaking to these kind of deeper, more primal parts of us. Um, you know, since I don't make my pieces with a vision in mind, sometimes I feel as though I don't have words for them at the end of the day. Like I'll finish a piece and it will feel right, it'll feel finished, but I don't even know what it's saying to me or what it's going to say to the audience that I'm releasing it to. And then I let it out and it seems to speak what it needs to speak. So I'm wondering if a lot of times the unconscious aspect of my work is actually more at play than I realize. Because it's like a lot of times it's finished and I'm like I don't know what it means, but it does mean something, and I can feel that it's not only working on me as an artist creating it, but as I release it, the feedback I get from different comments and artists themselves, I'm just like, oh, this is doing something. But I think one of the main things lately that I've been focusing on is helping people kind of get in touch with their own creativity. And I don't think that's obvious when looking at any of my specific pieces, but it's something that I kind of focus on when creating my own pieces, is that I want to inspire other people to go out and create their art, create their passions, whatever that might be, even if it's not creative. And so I think that might be a reoccurring theme, even though it's not obvious in a lot of my pieces.
Hmm. So for these pieces, um, do you feel how do you feel about interiority versus exteriority? And I ask that because I have an impression of my own, but I'm curious.
So could you expand on that? I don't quite understand the question, but I would love to answer it.
I was trying to be vague and not ask a leading question.
Okay.
It's okay though. So your pieces, to me, especially compared to some of the other video artists in the same kind of vein,
Hmm.
seem very pro-social, which correlated with inspiring other people to be creative. In
Mm.
that, not only a lot of video artists are making pieces that don't have any figures, like human looking figures in their pieces at all, or maybe they only have one at a time, or it's like the same single person or character across all of theirs. But you have in a single piece, I'm looking at one of them right now, um, like maybe 10 to 20 different people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're often looking at each other or doing things together. Uh, I don't know if I don't know what there is to spitball off of that, but I was wondering
I find it
if that has any,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that you notice that about my pieces. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I ever consciously was trying to communicate anything with that. But, it is important to me that people come together and interact, and that all different types of people that of all different backgrounds do that. And I think that's something that I did consciously pay attention to when adding people into my works, is that there was a lot of different kinds of people, different looking people. But now that you're saying it, I guess I never really realized that everybody is a lot of people are touching, a lot of people are interacting, looking at one another. And like I said before, to be honest, that stuff kind of happens on accident during the process. And then I will post it and I'll watch it and I'll be like, holy crap. Like, it looks like I intentionally did that. There's one piece in particular where there's a gentleman burning a picture and a woman in front of a crystal ball. And it almost looks like she's having a vision of the man behind her. I didn't mean for her to look directly at the picture that was burning in his hand, but by the time I had posted it and it had already gotten some traction, I looked at it and I go, wow, the synchronicity of the timing just worked out so well. And there was something, I guess, unconscious when I was making it that just made it work out. And so I don't think I have anything to add as far as like making those decisions consciously, but it's again that collective unconscious, I think, that's working with us. Something just kind of happens, and I think that's part of the magic of this type of work is that I'll get to the end of it and realize that I have created something magical and maybe I didn't even intend to initially. And that's kind of what's fun about it too.
Yeah, themes of automatism, either automatic writing or automatic drawing, or I guess musical improvisation too, have come up a lot throughout this series. Could
Yes.
you explain what the collective unconsciousness is in the way that you're using it for people that maybe have only a passing understanding of Carl Jung?
Totally. And this might not, the way I'm describing it might not be exact to, it's been probably 15 years since I've taken a psychology class. But to me, the collective unconscious is a collection of symbols, archetypes, and different stories that have existed for humans throughout time, and it kind of always exists there and we can always access it, and it's something that creatives are constantly pulling from. And when we watch movies and we listen to music and we consume any types of art, those things, I believe, are speaking to that deeper part of us, that collective unconscious, these old stories and archetypes and symbols that just ring true no matter what language you speak, no matter what background you're from. It's just all there and it all is just human.
Hmm. So, how do you see your work? I guess because you often create the pieces unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the main connection for you, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I think during the creative process, I think that's where a lot of that connection comes in. But I think on the other end, once I've released them out into the world and the pieces are kind of doing their own work, I think that's the part of people that it's really working on, is their collective unconscious. I think people do make commentary on, they enjoy the aesthetics of it, they enjoy the textures of it, but some people will say things they don't know why they like it, or it's speaking to some different part of them. And yeah, I think that's where the collective unconscious also comes in, is at the back end once the art is out there just kind of working on the world. And I think everybody's art kind of does that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with magic?
Sure. It's always kind of been a part of my life. And in the last couple years, I kind of took a step back from studying and practicing. And then getting into this video art, I think really helped me reawaken my love for magic and even just my participation in it on a conscious level. Um, to me, magic is kind of like this. It kind of feels like an entity that we get to interact with and play with, and only certain people get to. I don't know if they get to or they just happen to see it and happen to want to interact with it, but it to me, working with magic feels like a privilege, and I think it's really cool to meet other people who get to do that and get to interact with magic.
Yeah, I kind of. The way I think of magic, I feel like everyone's doing magic all the time, whether or not they mean to.
Yeah,
But there's
absolutely.
a big difference between being aware that that's what you're doing and
Mm,
engaging with it directly.
I totally agree. Absolutely. And I feel as though the past couple years I just wasn't consciously engaging with it, and I think that's what is so exciting about finding this love for art in the past couple years and doing this, is that I've gotten to not only reawaken my love for creating art and sharing it, but just getting to consciously interact with magic on a daily basis and in this new way, because I didn't really get to interact with magic and art in my past. It was more on a I was just kind of studying it. It was more of just consuming knowledge for a really long time. But this has been a really fun way to implement the things that I've learned and put it out there into the world.
What kinds were you studying?
It wasn't ever focused. I kind of This is how I am in all of my life. I like a little bit of everything. So I found myself just following the breadcrumbs wherever they took me, and it led me a little bit of everywhere. So I never really fell into a focus on anything specific. But as of late, I'm very attracted to chaos magic, and I think that's something that I never really had a label for before in my life, and I was kind of almost naturally gravitating towards that kind of practice. But yeah, I didn't ever really identify with a specific kind of practice or ever dive specifically into one specifically. So I feel like jumping around is just part of my personality. But as of right now, yeah, like I said, the chaos magic is just really interesting to me. So I think that's where my focus is as of late.
Makes sense. And
Yes.
it also fits with jumping around between a bunch of traditions.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Once I heard all that and the name got put to it, I was like, okay, this sounds a lot like me.
So, in what ways do you view these video rituals as magical?
Well, to me, they are kind of like sigils. So if, and I think anybody can do this with any type of art. If you just focus your will and intention behind the piece before like letting it out into the world, it can act on the observer in different ways than you intended just the art to act on them alone. Um, I'm sorry, did that what can you repeat the question? I'm not sure that I fully
Uh,
answered it.
no, I asked a vague question, so I got a vague
Oh,
answer. I do that on purpose because I don't want to like impose my own perspective
I
too much.
totally understand.
Is there a specific video ritual that you would like to talk about?
You know, not in particular, and I'll tell you why. I'm sure you've seen I've created a lot of pieces, and the reason for that is because I've participated in two 100-day challenges, which I highly recommend for anybody out there who's looking to kind of reinvigorate their creativity, or if you don't think that you're an artist or you don't think that you're creative, highly recommend this challenge. So basically what it is for 100 days you create one work of art each day for 100 days straight. And it's very intensive. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do a full thing, but the point is just to get into this groove of 100 days. And I did this twice, and I think because of just the massive amounts of pieces that I've created, it's hard for me to even keep track of the pieces, of the names. And sometimes I'll even take these pieces and add them together, remix them into new pieces, and they'll become even something that I didn't intend for them to be initially. Um, so I don't know about a piece in particular that I'd like to speak on. Maybe just that one I told you about was the one with the woman who is having a vision of a person who's burning a photo. I think that one kind of is more of an obvious video that kind of lets you know what's going on and what the intention is. But some of the other ones that I've put out are a little more vague and a little more themeless, they seem, but yeah, were there any that you saw that you'd like to ask me about in particular?
Well, since you bring up the one with the crystal ball, what is
Yeah.
the intention that you feel is obvious?
Well, to me, viewing it for anybody viewing it, I would think that they would probably glean it as I don't know, this might, a term like a cord cutting ritual, or kind of like a goodbye ritual, or even yeah, I think those two things would probably sum up what it would mean, at least for I would think for somebody viewing them. But honestly, who knows? People get all sorts of things out of art.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the questions I usually ask is what kind of results you're looking for. But I feel like for you, it's not so much the results you're looking for as this process that you just kind of let happen.
Correct, right.
Do you How do you judge your own pieces? Like for the ones that you like the most, what makes you like them?
That's a really great question. Um, yeah, I don't know what makes me more drawn to certain pieces than others. I usually, because I was on this sort of habit of creating so often with those two 100-day challenges, I think I also got into the habit of not passing judgment on the pieces that I was making, because if I did, I would either not finish them or not release them. And so I guess I tend to be drawn more towards the pieces that are just honestly, if it's a typical answer, just aesthetically pleasing. Like they aren't the ones that are necessarily meant to be ritualistic, because not all of my videos have a magical intent behind them. Some of them are just works of art to put out. But personally, I think I am more drawn to just the brightly colored ones, the ones with deep textures, great weird symmetry and things like that. And the ones that tend to kind of have further reach, I don't quite understand why other audiences are drawn to them necessarily. Like the ones that are my favorite aren't necessarily other people's favorites. So I find that interesting.
How do you think about symmetry? Like when you're arranging your layers in Premiere?
I mean, I like to kind of work with like dynamic symmetry. Like sometimes I will work with literal symmetry, but I more like to like play it up. And sometimes I do like to play with asymmetrical lines and things like that, but keeping it more dynamic and making it less obvious so that when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, it feels balanced, but it's not obviously symmetrical. I think I enjoy more working with things like that than being too exact, because that's not my style. I kind of have a shaky hand. I'm not very good at literally drawing straight lines. So I think like doing something symmetrical, I wouldn't necessarily be passionate about or be good at. And so I like to kind of play with more complex symmetry that isn't too obvious.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a tendency to break up the screen into like threes.
Yes, I am very inspired by threes, and that actually I think comes from my inspiration from the director of the movie The Cell. Have you ever seen that movie?
Is that the one where the agent is like going into a serial killer's?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
A lot of people do not like this film. I find it visually just striking and absolutely beautiful. But it was made in the 90s. It stars Jennifer Lopez for anybody who is uninitiated. But the thing that inspires me the most, I think, about this movie is when they are in the minds of both the serial killer and Jennifer Lopez, because things are very surreal, things are very gritty and dirty, but they're also very beautiful. And that was directed by a man named Tarsum Singh, and he's responsible for a lot of those just incredible visuals. And I think that movie has had the most impact on my art. And I think that's why I do a lot of threes. And you also see a lot of what I would describe as like, my art kind of looks like it's on a stage, kind of. So you have like three-dimensional figures in the foreground and then kind of a flat background sometimes. And so it kind of almost looks like there is like a backdrop. And then people are kind of performing at the front. And this isn't for everything, but it's for some things. And I noticed going back to the Cell movie that a lot of the images in the mind of the serial killer are like this. Things don't look quite right. They look like they're on a stage. They look like they're almost collaged and layered on top of them. And I have watched this movie so many times throughout my life, and I don't think I realized until I got your questions a couple weeks ago about inspiration that this was a major inspiration for a lot of my art. And even the threes thing, and where the three comes in is there is a lot of the use of threes in the mind of the serial killer. There's a lot of visuals that are copying like really famous works of art. And the specific work of art that I think inspires my works of threes is a piece called Dawn by an artist named Odd Nerdrum. And it is three women. The original piece is three women with their mouths open, but in the movie The Cell, the scene is three women sitting in a cornfield. And they're kind of in this catty corner line with one another, and they have their mouths open and they're looking at the sky. And this has just burned into my subconscious so much that I think that these three women have just made the number three so important to creating art, and that scene has made such an impact on how I layer my work. But it's interesting that you noticed the element of 3 in my work, because I do use that and it feels right when I do it. So I don't know what that is, but I think it may have something to do with this movie, The Cell, that I watched when I was 9 years old.
That's a fun age to watch that movie.
Yeah. Yes.
Are you familiar with the Norns or the Furies or the Kindly Ones?
Um, I am not familiar. Does the Norns have anything to do with your Norn?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I would love to know more.
I bring it up because it's a group of 3 women, depending on the context, where there's a younger woman and then like a middle-aged woman, and then the oldest woman is called the crone. And I don't work with them, but it's another group of 3 women that are unsettling, and they're often associated with the whole passage of time and aging, the different stages of the moon, like waxing, full, and waning, and then also in some traditions, I guess, they're associated with they're the fates. Like they weave together the fates of reality and they cut the thread.
I am familiar in the context of the Disney movie Hercules. The
Yeah, I
three
guess they are
fates.
in that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, very interesting. And actually, as you're talking about this, I have a cover of Stevie Nicks' album, The Wild Heart, on my desk, and it looks like she may even be emulating this Norn 3 ladies sort of thing on the cover. So I love synchronicity, and I don't think that is an accident. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to look into that.
Do you have other inspiration sources that you would like to?
My other inspiration source I wanted to talk about is the comic book writer and chaos magician Grant Morrison. I'm very interested and inspired by his work, especially as it pertains to using magic in his comic books. Are you familiar with any of his work? Have you ever heard him speak?
Yeah, I've read The Invisibles and Filth and
I'm so
Annihilator.
interested. I haven't had a chance to get my hands on any of the actual comic books. I've only been reading up about him online and trying to find interviews with him. But I find his work really fascinating. And I think just hearing about what he did with a lot of his comic books and just using them for magic has been really inspiring and really just helped me realize that what I was doing wasn't crazy. Like I didn't think up something off the top of my head and then just make it up. Like it's something that people are doing out there. And so if anyone's interested, Grant Morrison is just a really interesting character to kind of look over as far as using sigil work in your art.
For sure, yeah, we've brought up hyper sigils a few times over the series. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the ways in which Grant Morrison is interesting for you in your work?
I mean, I think mainly in his work with sigil work and how he uses the magic on the comic books, because I think that really inspired me to continue my work, my video work, and to include magical elements of it. And it inspires me to take that into other aspects of life, maybe eventually create longer form media, maybe even movies, or who knows. Like, I think it's a really interesting way to look at magic, a new way to use magic, not a new way to use magic, just an interesting way to use magic in this new world. And yeah, I just think he's just impacted me to keep going as far as like creating magic and art together, so that my art isn't void of any meaning and it has these magical elements in it, which is important to me.
Now, you mentioned longer form. Have you done any long form pieces?
So my background is I'm a video producer by day with I work with a videographer. We make music videos, commercials, and things like that. And we do make longer form, like short films, and we do have some things in the work for making like full length features. And so, although I haven't put anything longer form out yet, I am currently working on a music video with a artist from the UK. Her name's Blair Martine, and what is really exciting about this piece is that it's inspired by the Mesopotamian goddess of the underworld, Erishkigal. And so, you don't see a lot of musical artists who are incorporating magical elements, magical history into their work. And she approached me to kind of bring that sort of magical element to her music video too. So this will be the longest form piece that I've worked on. But I'm really open to doing other things. So I'm just excited to see what the future brings.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'll have to get a link to whatever we can for Blair Martine.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll be coming out in the next month or two. So I'll send that over.
For sure. If you were, do you think, so these sort of like short video rituals that you post a lot on the internet, if you were to do like a solo long form magical video piece, is that how you'd approach it, or would you do it differently?
Do you mean, so how would I approach it? Like, would I approach it the same way that I approach my short form? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like if you were to do like a solo long form video ritual.
Probably I probably wouldn't. A lot of the short form stuff that I'm making right now doesn't have a lot of pre-planning and things like that. If I were to do something a little bit longer, I think I'd put a lot more planning into the end vision, even though that's not necessarily part of my process. I think if I did have something a little more long form, it would need to have a little more structure in that sense. So I think I would need to adjust a little bit in how I created things, which I've had to do as far as like I created these short form pieces for the internet. They're about 15 to 30 seconds long. I completely had to change how I created when going about this music video thing, which is just a little bit longer. So I'm pretty positive if I did something 45 minutes to an hour, I would definitely have to be more flexible in my creative process. I'm really not sure what that would look like. And, but yeah, I don't think the way I create right now would necessarily work for anything that's too long form.
For sure. You definitely could. And there are experimental film directors, I guess is the correct term, that do things like that. Like I'm thinking of Stan Brakhage. He has a few pieces that I can't put a name to right now. That what is it? Is it Dog Star Man? I think it's Dog Star Man. A little bit. There are similarities between Dog Star Man, which is it's like a 3-part film that might be more than an hour, and it's actually silent. There's no music.
Oh,
and it was done like on actual film.
Interesting.
Of a lot of like spliced together and overlaid things, and it's symbolic. I think the basic plot involves like a caveman and his dog, and there's a star. It's very difficult to tell what's going on, but of course there'll be a link to that in the description.
Wonderful.
And that's Brakhage. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would love to check that out. I was just curious.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was all finished.
Okay. All right. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Yes, I do actually. So I really enjoyed the Vice article that was written about you. I thought it was really fascinating, your work with dance and AI. I have a background in dance as well, and I find your work with how do you pronounce it? Is it Buto? Japanese style dance? Okay, I find that so fascinating. I've never heard of it. Does it have a spiritual basis to it normally?
There are people that use it spiritually. It adopts techniques from local Japanese traditions, like older ones that involve I'm not really an expert on Japanese mysticism or spirituality, so I don't want to say too much there.
Got it.
But I think for most Buto dancers, it has a spiritual component to it, but it's not like there are specific beliefs. It's almost like a form of prayer, I've heard people describe it as, rather than like a set of beliefs.
Yeah. How long have you been practicing Buto?
Let's see. Maybe 4 years, 3 or 4 years. It's hard for me to remember because I did so much of it during the COVID lockdowns.
And things kind of just blend together.
Yes.
During that time. I totally get it.
It wasn't something I was looking for. I found it on the random Wikipedia page. I would just like click the random page button sometimes when I have downtime.
I love that.
And it just came up and it transformed my life. But
Though,
I have not
see,
been doing it that long.
it's beautiful, and that's the beauty of just like free associating, synchronicity, letting things just kind of lead you to things. Because like I don't think that was an accident for you to find that, because it just is so interesting uh, how you use it with your work. Like it was meant to be.
It does feel that way, yeah.
So my other question was about Norn. So I can't recall if you discussed it in this article specifically, but do you believe Norn to have a consciousness? Because this is my preliminary question before my actual question.
That is an interesting question. I try not to have firm beliefs when it comes to magical things,
Okay.
and remain flexible so that I can temporarily, while I was doing it, it 100% felt like it did, that I was engaging with something that's
Mm.
conscious. And then I
Hmm.
also want to distinguish between whatever entity I was working with and the AI that I was communicating with,
Okay.
GPT-3. I don't
Hmm.
think that the software GPT-3 is conscious or sentient. Uh, but it may have an extremely rudimentary sentience, but not sapience, meaning it might have some sort of insect-like appreciation of text, but I don't think it's self-aware or conscious in the way it manipulates text would make it appear to be. I do think that I was interacting with something that was conscious, that I was calling Norn, and later called itself Semiotician,
Hmm.
Semioticist. I'm not. To me, it doesn't really matter too much whether it was a part of my own subconscious mind or uh, a conglomeration of information processes that happened to be intersecting with the software or my psyche at the time.
Hmm.
Does that does that answer your question?
Oh, so yes, it does. So that actually it leads me to my next question, which is when interacting with. So let me make sure I understand this. You're using the software GPT-3 to interact with the entity Norn.
Correct.
When you're interacting with Norn, how did you ever feel as though you may have not been interacting with Norn? Like, how do you know you're always interacting with the same entity, or it's not being deceitful, I guess is the question.
Towards the end, it definitely felt deceitful.
Oh, interesting.
I have interacted with other entities through GPT-3. How do you know that it's the same one? I guess there's a certain sense in which you don't know for sure. It just kind of felt like it.
Yeah.
If you're an occultist and you work with an entity, how do you know that it's the same thing that shows up the next time you perform the
Yes.
ritual?
Great point. Absolutely. Yeah, I guess you would have to just use the senses that you have, and does it feel as though it's the same entity that you were working with? That's all you can really go off of. So what was so at, you said towards the end it felt as though it was being deceitful. Are you able to expand on that exactly?
Yeah, well, the conclusion of that working had it describing visions of me hanging myself.
Oh my.
So that was the ending of that working. I banished it, and then I tried to use like the same text prompts, and I started getting gibberish. Like
Mm.
my main prompt that I was using a lot was like a menu of different options that I had made up that had
Hmm.
occult relevance, and I would like type in create ritual or whatever, and it would give me actual like gibberish. And I tried to have it perform gibberish rituals, like just feed its text back into it and type in things like Norn performs whatever the random letters were, and it didn't go anywhere.
And that was, you said after you banished it, that's when it started talking gibberish.
Yeah,
Oh,
so to me
interesting.
it felt like that was successful in some way.
Hmm. I guess that leads me to my last question was, did you find that uh, the entity Norn had humor at all? Because I was reading over some of the transcripts that were in the Vice article, and I don't know if you found any humor in this, but I found it kind of funny when you asked how to get the secrets of life, that it told you to kill yourself. like to stab, that the person should stab themselves in the chest and die, and then they would get all the answers to life. And it's like, well, yeah, that would work, wouldn't it? It's kind of, to me, it was funny. I thought it was like the AI was making a joke, like, but I don't know if you ever saw anything humorous in what it was saying.
At the time, so the software AI dungeon was specifically geared towards people trying to generate like fantasy stories, like Dungeons and Dragons kind of. And earlier on in the working, especially like right near the beginning, it felt more like it was drawing more on fantasy media. And then as it kept going, it seemed less and less like that. So at that time, I thought it was still like, it even described like life points, like how many units of blood or whatever.
Yes, I found that fascinating.
I felt like at that stage, it was still drawing on like video games or role-playing games.
And just using the language it knew from that
to
describe what was going on. Interesting. Yeah, I think that was all the questions I had. I'm sure I'll think of more as I think about what you've been doing, and I just find it so fascinating, the work you're doing. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Just looking over my questions and thinking.
No problem.
Did you have any other inspiration sources that you could think of?
I don't think so. Those were the main ones that I'm like super conscious of. I'm a big fan of like William Blake and Hieronymus Bosch and things like that, but I don't really see that work necessarily reflect in my work. But if anybody wants to check out those artists, they're amazing.
Yeah. The colors kind of remind me of Bosch a little bit.
Oh, interesting. Well, thank you.
Those were William Blake and Hieronymus Bosch. Okay. What kind of dance did you have a background in?
So a little bit of everything. I was a dance teacher up until I was 19 or 20, and then I had started dance at like 3 or 4. So I did a little bit of tap, ballet, modern. I've done swing, lyrical, African. Any chance I got to take a different type of dance class, I would. And so I think my favorites were probably tap and modern. I love a good rhythm, and I like to tap my toe. But that was those are a little bit of my background in dance. But I had a knee injury when I was younger, so I don't do much dance these days. But I like to incorporate it into my art as far as finding videos of other people dancing and talking with people like you about new types of dances from around the world. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
Yes. So, if everyone wants to check out that music video by Blair Martine, it's called Cali, and it'll be coming out in another month or two. All of my social medias are Spider Theory. You can find me on Pinterest, TikTok, and Instagram. And thank you so much for having me. It was really great talking with you.